Welcome back. In this video, I compare different brands of acrylic paint for gel printing, with a focus on how they stack up against my go-to Golden Open acrylics. Many of you have mentioned struggling to get the same results using other brands. So I'll be testing out a few popular options and sharing my thoughts. Plus, I'll reveal a magic ingredient that can help other acrylics behave more like the Golden Open acrylic. This video is a bit longer, so I have included chapters in the description. Spend more time watching the comparisons that interest you and skip the ones that don't. And I have included a review at the end so we can compare the dried prints. Let's get started. So to try to keep this test apples and apples, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same pigment of the three different paint types I'll be testing. So I've chosen Ultramarine blue because it is available in all of these brands. So I have, of course, my Golden Open one that I love. I've also got a heavy bodied paint in a good quality. This is our local art store's brand Opus. It would be similar to like Dick Blick's paint, maybe a shade less pigmented than Golden, but not bad at all. And then also I'm using the Amsterdam acrylic to compare it with, because this is one that I think a lot of people use. And then to keep it again as close as possible, I'll be using the same type of botanical and then the same type of stencil. For the most part, I'm going to be using my Spectra Art tissue, which is a better quality tissue paper. I may also use a little bit of printer paper. And if you stick around towards the end of the video, I'll be revealing a secret ingredient which may allow you to use your heavy bodies as Golden Opens, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So I'm going to start off with botanicals. It's something I love to do. I'm going to put the Golden Open over here on this side, and I'm going to do the best I can to use exactly the same amount of paint on both sides. This is, of course, not totally scientific. Don't have a weigh scale or anything like that, but we'll give it a go. And I'm using the same type of brayer on both sides. So this is the Amsterdam and this is the Golden Open. I'm going to go ahead and roll those up. And I'm not being too concerned about filling the exact plate. I just want a good swath of it on the plate that we can put some botanicals down and see what it looks like. Okay, there's the Amsterdam one, and then this is the Golden Open. Now, one would expect the Golden paint to be more heavily pigmented than the Amsterdam because of the price that you're paying for it, but we'll see how it works out. Okay, so this is some alfalfa that I picked at the dog park this morning. I washed it off because you know what happens at the dog park. And we'll put 2 sprigs on each side. And I'm going to pull them separately on tissue. I'll do this side first. I find a lot of the Amsterdam colors are somewhat opaque. You don't get exactly the same types of colors as you do with the other paint lines, but I actually use that in another technique that I have, which I'll be creating a video for fairly soon. Okay, so I'm going to pull that off. So that's our first Amsterdam. This is the first Golden Open. I'm using a clean brayer here to just help me press in the weeds, get the detail out from the background. So it's a little bit more rumply. That's my fault. A little bit wet at the bottom. Oh well. There we go. I'll go back and see if I can pick up some more from this side. And as you can see, it's not coming through much. It's already pretty much done on this side. There's a little bit coming through where it's still in the crevices. And it's left quite a bit of dry paint on the plate. We'll go back to the golden side. And as you can see, as it's coming through here, there is still paint on the plate that it's pulling up. Being a little bit aggressive, unfortunately, with this roller, just because I want to kind of keep this experiment moving along and not stop too much. So I've torn the paper in a couple of spots. Oh, again, that's my error. So you can see we have a second positive print here, which is light, but I find a lot of use for those. But I'm going to go ahead and pull these up because I'm afraid that the Amsterdam is drying just way too quickly over here. And I'm going to give it another pull and see if we can get anything up from it. Oh yes, so it is giving us a nice positive. Amsterdam third pull. And as you can see, it's already dried up a little bit in spots where we can't pull it up. Now I'm going to go back to the golden side. I'd like to take one more. I would normally take one more impression. If I can be a little less aggressive this time with the, with the brayer and not kill the plants. And still tore the tissue. This is kind of a lumpy piece of alfalfa, but just the way it goes sometimes. It's just, sometimes I'll flatten them out under a bit of weight before I print them. So this is a very light, faint, negative print, but I do have quite a bit of use for these kinds of prints. And then we'll pull up these. That'll be our first positive. And I'll give you guys a really good look at the end of the video. If you want to skip ahead, it would be in the chapter called Results. So this is my fourth print from the golden open side. And I'm going to see if there's anything left on the plate. I have some colors that I know will give me extra prints because they're very strong. Dioxazine purple, anthracnone blue, Payne's gray is another one. Ultramarine blue is not as strong. So as you can see, that one is fairly light and subtle. On this side, this paint is dry now. This paint, or over on this side, I now have a clean plate, which is lovely. Okay, now the next two that I'd like to try out are the Artist Quality Ultramarine Blue. So this is quite a good quality of paint, and I'm going to compare it to the same paint but mixed with the secret ingredient, which is this golden open acrylic gel. This comes in gloss and medium. For this purpose, I usually choose the gloss. What I'm going to do is on one side, I'm going to put straight ultramarine blue in heavy bodied. This is not an open paint. And on the other side, I'm going to mix these two on here. I'm going to pre-mix them and then put them onto the plate so that we can keep quantities equal. What I found is that if I use this one mixed in with some of the heavy body paints that I have that I maybe don't have that color in my open selection, it helps extend the printing time and emulates the open paint a little bit better. So let's take a look at how that performs. So over here, I'm going to put out just the straight heavy bodied paint. And then over here, I'm going to put it out and then mix it with about an equal amount of the open gel. I'm just going to give that a good mix. The gel helps build in a little bit of the body, which is good. I find that if you dilute any of the acrylic paints, they don't roll out quite as evenly on the gel plate. That could just be me, but that's what I found. So, okay, so I'm going to take this and put this over on this side. And again, I'm going to try to see if I can't get about the same amount. And I think this one is the one for the non-open product. So you can see this paint has a very nice, rich color. And this time I think I will use a stencil instead of the botanicals. So this is the same paint, but with the open media, or open gel, not medium, open gel mixed in with it. It's going to be less pigmented because there's less actual paint and more gel. But we'll see how it does in terms of printing. Okay, so I have two very similar stencils here. Put one on one side. Actually, these are masks. There we go. And the first print through the mask I'm going to do on both sides. It's just going to be with printer paper. There we go. Give it a bit of squish down. These are stencils that I've made myself, actually, using a negative print from one of my series, and then converting that on the computer to be an image that I can send to my Cricut cutter. And then I cut it out from there. And there's a video that I've posted on that. I'll put it in a link just above and also in the description if you'd like to go see that process. Okay, so this is the one from the Straight Opus paint. You can see there's quite a brilliant color, nice clean lines, but it has taken basically all of the paint off the plate. And this is the same paint with the gel mixed in with it. And again, we get quite a brilliant color, but you'll notice that there's quite a bit of paint left on the plate. So there's nothing here to pick up on a subsequent pull, but I actually quite like this pattern, so I'm going to use a bit of tissue to pull up this side. Oh, you can see it's getting lots of paint. You can always tell the way it bleeds through. So that is less intense, but has some nice little patterns in it. And I'm going to do that one more time. There's not a lot. There's a lot around the edges, but you can still see that there's some that's coming up through this where the stencil is coming. Now I'm leaving the stencil on this side to try to keep that paint wet. I don't want to give this an unfair advantage. Oh yeah. See, I quite like this type of print. I find it very useful. Okay, so we'll take this stencil off. And it's already a little bit dry. I'm going to pull it on printer paper. Printer paper and the tissue give me very similar results. The difference is when you collage it on, the tissue goes transparent, the printer paper doesn't. So it just depends on your purpose, which paper you might choose. Or you could also use a nice rice paper. That'll give you a different result. Ooh, that's interesting. So you can see this is pretty spotty from underneath the stencil. I'm going to let this dry. So everybody's different, you know, in terms of what they like, what they're looking for out of a print. For me, I quite like to clear the paint out of the background with the negative pulls and then pull, you know, a nice clean positive. But again, just depends on what you're doing. There we go. There we have a ghost of the positive print. And you can see now I've got a fairly clean plate on this side. I'm just going to wipe off this outside edge because I'm going to let this dry a bit. Now, one thing about mixing that paint with the gel is I get twice as much. So that would be the amount of paint that I would now be able to put and pull another print with. Well, the edges will be a mess, but I just really want to pull the center, so a little matte medium down there. I could also pull with a different color paint, of course. I know lots of people really layer up these prints with very, very, very interesting results. Now this is not wet strength tissue, it's a Spectra tissue. So I may regret this, but it wouldn't be the first time I've regretted something I did on the gel plate. Just give that a moment to really absorb that stuff. And again, I'm only picking up one fresh layer here. So it's not as if I'm trying to pick up, 3 or 4 layers on the plate that have dried, etc. It's a fairly fresh layer. and it's just the one. There we go. And so there we go. That is the second positive print, and that is actually quite an interesting result. I quite like that. So let's do one more side-by-side comparison. I have all of this heavy bodied mixed with the golden open gel. I hate to waste it, so I'm going to put that on this side. And compare it to the golden open itself. So I'll just try to make that about the same amount. Now, ultramarine blue is a good pigment to try this out with because it doesn't change too much from brand to brand. It's the same basic pigment that they just grind into their own mediums and stuff. Now, this side's a little bit darker, which is what I would expect because this is pure paint, and this is paint with the gel in it. And I think I'll go back to the plants. I quite like the shape of these little plants. I'm pretty sure it's just alfalfa that's probably volunteered from a nearby neighbor's farm where they grow hay. But I do like the patterns, and I like to use the different dark negatives, light negatives, positives in different ways in my collage making. Okay, so this is the heavy-bodied paint plus gel, and this is the golden open itself. Now, if I'm printing not as a test, if I'm printing for prints, then I would usually mix the paint on the plate rather than just going with a single color. I would maybe go with 2 or 3 colors. And ultramarine blue is definitely one of the ones that comes into that type of process. There we go. So again, this is the heavy bodied plus gel side, and this is the golden open side. So at this point, really very, very similar results that I'm getting from both the heavy bodied plus the gel and the golden open itself. So if you like the style that I use and the way that I print botanicals, but you're having a bit of a frustration with not getting the same kind of multiple poles and negatives and things like that, you can buy a jar, an 8-ounce jar of the golden acrylic open gel for about the same price as a tube of heavy-bodied paint. So that would allow you to take your existing artist quality paints and to go ahead and print with them in this way. Craft paints will just not give you the same sort of results. They don't have the transparency and they don't have the pigment loads. But they're definitely very useful for other techniques. So this is our third negative print on each side. And this is coming out quite nicely. A little sticky on the plate. Which happens. Well, see, that's a quite nice negative, soft negative print. And a little bit more pigment on this side. You can see the little bit of darker lines in and around here that this one doesn't have, but really very comparable. And now let's take these up and do some positives. As you can see, this one's a wee bit darker. That's again that higher pigment load per, little bit. I had to dilute this when I mixed it with the gel, so it's going to be a little fainter. But we'll compare these in just a moment, and I'll give you a better look at how they turned out, and we'll compare them side by side. And I think we can get one more print off of each side. And there we go. The heavy bodied plus open gel versus the golden open paint. So let's take a look at the dried prints of all the paints that we tried out. So on the first negative prints, in other words, after I've rolled up the plate, put the plant matter on the plate, and then taken that first print, as you can see, all of the paints did quite well. This is the golden open acrylic. It's the darkest, which is what I would expect because that's pure paint that's on the plate, and it's the most heavily pigmented brand. This is the Opus heavy bodied paint with the addition of the golden open gel. So a little bit less dark, still very good color, and that's what you would expect from a paint that has been diluted with a gel. And then this one is the Amsterdam, which on a first print worked out really well. And these two were from the other test that I did of the Opus Heavy Bodied directly versus the Opus Heavy Bodied plus the open gel. And again, the primary difference here is that this is darker because there's more pigment in it. This has been diluted 50% with the gel. Now the Amsterdam paint did quite well on its first pull. I use this paint for a lot of things. I don't use it generally for my botanical prints, and that'll be obvious in just a moment. When I went to do a second pull of what was in the background, this was all I got. By the time I'd done that, the paint had already set on the plate, and there was very little that came up. When I lifted the plants to print what was underneath, I got a fairly good image. A little broken in places. I guess I just hadn't been quite quick enough about pulling that plant matter up and getting the paper down. I think it could probably have done a little bit better. But as you can see, the only usable prints I really got here was the strong negative print, the print of what is in the background, and then the positive print of the plants themselves. So whereas with my favorite go-to golden opens, I would have gotten anywhere from 4 to 6 prints out of a single roll-up with those nice shades that are lighter and lighter and lighter. I was only able to get the 2. Now with the Opus heavy-bodied ultramarine blue, which by the way is very similar to other artist grade paints that you would be able to get. They don't have a lot of fillers in them. They're not quite as heavily pigmented as perhaps the Goldens themselves or Liquitex, but they're a pretty decent quality paint. So the original one that I pulled, the negative print of what was behind, in this case, a stencil, that one was pretty good. But then when I lifted the stencil, there wasn't a lot of really clean, protected paint underneath that. A lot of the paint came up with the stencil, whereas with the Golden Open, it would leave that behind. However, I did get a very interesting print of what remained on the plate. So I saw this little sketchy bit of paint on the plate, allowed it to dry, and then put on some matte medium to lift it. And this is actually quite interesting. It has some interesting little textures and lines. So that's an interesting avenue I'll have to explore down the road. So now let's compare the Golden Open paint, Ultramarine Blue, with the Opus Heavy Bodied Ultramarine Blue with the addition of the Open Gel. Both gave me a set of 5 nice prints. This is the Golden Open. It gave me a strong negative print, then one that's a little lighter, and then the one that's quite faint. And then it gave me 2 positive prints, a strong one and then a ghost. The Golden Open Gel diluted the Ultramarine Blue from Opus a bit, so the color is maybe not as strong as this group, but it still gave me 3 very nice negative prints, gradually getting lighter, and then 2 positive prints, a strong one and a ghost. So my conclusion from this would be that I will probably still continue to print with the Golden Opens. I particularly like their transparent colors and their single pigment colors for my work. But this is definitely an alternative. And like I say, this Opus heavy bodied paint would be similar to like a Dick Blick brand or other good quality paint that you might have in your paint box right now. And using it about half and half, you can play with the proportions of the Open Gel. You can still get very, very good results from your prints. So I hope this has been useful to you. Let me know how you make out in the comments down below.